What comes to mind when you think of an indie film? Let's list a few things. Usually set in an everyday reality as opposed to a distant future or past, artistic and personal in tone, stories often reflect outcasts of everyday people, music is often sourced from bands instead of orchestral scoring, or even a low budget featuring actors that are not A-list superstars. Occasionally. Basically anything that doesn't come straight out of Hollywood. Sure, there's more to consider, but let's go with this. You've got examples such as Moonlight, Reservoir Dogs, Clerks, The Blair Witch Project, Pulp Fiction, Juno, even the first Terminator movie. There's so many more, but just to name a few. Independent films have been around for decades, but I'm not here to talk about its history. That's for someone else's video. What I want to talk about is with big-budget studio films coming out every year, it might be a surprise to know that some directors behind these films started out in the independent film world. To aspiring and upcoming filmmakers striving to make their way, it's actually quite common trend to start outside a major studio before finding a job within. Now, with that out of the way, I'm going to talk about it in 3 parts. 1, the core difference between indie and Hollywood. 2, an indie director who's became a household name in Hollywood. 3, how that indie director still kept his indie style while still doing a Hollywood movie. Now, that indie director I'm going to talk about, his name is Ryan Coogler. With only 3 features films under his belt, Ryan Coogler has experienced what it's like to create a film, whether independent or studio-driven, and still receive great acclaim with putting his vision onto screen.
I'm from a place where it just wasn't really something that people did, and from the Bay Area, same place as Maury, same place as Tom Hanks. Crazy enough,
That's true.
Yeah, but I spent most of my life playing football and going to school and thinking I was going to do that,
You make an NFL?
That was what we thought until you got older. It was like till I had to tackle Marshawn. You know what I'm saying? And it was then it was a reality check.
Right.
So once I realized that it was maybe an option, you just needed time to do it. That's what it also gave. It was just hours. You know what I mean? Like standing on set, like learning what it is.
Just knowing someone who does it too, because I don't think I grew up ever knowing anybody who was a filmmaker. I knew people who were doing theater,
right,
but I didn't know anybody. What does it even look like?
Yeah, and what you don't know, you're afraid of. You know what I mean? I found it to be that. I mean, in terms of, I can't say what it failed to teach me. I think you get out of it, what you bring to it inherently and circumstantially. You know what I mean? I was fortunate enough to come out of school and make my first movie pretty quickly. And it was through a connection that I made in school that I was able to pitch it, So I got nothing bad to say about the process, It was expensive.
You might know him the most for the recent Marvel Studios Black Panther. Even though he's working on many studio tentpoles now, his first feature was an acclaimed Indian film that won many awards upon its release called Fruitvale Station. Now, Fruitvale Station tells the story of the last 24 hours of the life of Oscar Grant, who was shot to death by a police officer at Oakland's Fruitvale BART station on January 1st, 2009. Also developed and produced by Oscar-winning actor Forrest Whitaker, Whitaker deemed Coogler a unique voice. His second feature was Creed, a sports drama centered on Adonis, the son of Apollo Creed, and his journey to continue his father's legacy. His third outing, well, you already know, major studio production, gross billions of dollars, soon to be getting a sequel. You get that by now. Ryan Coogler's work has been hailed by critics for centering on often overlooked cultures and characters, most notably African Americans. Each feature he has done so far, indie or studio produced, starred Michael B. Jordan, a notable black actor, and centers around relatable situations and its characters at the center of the action. Now, with that aside, what's the core difference between indie films and studio films? Well, typically we'd say money. Lower budget, funding, sure, but the film's budget doesn't always distinguish whether it's an independent film or not. Usually it's normal for studios to support independent films by granting a wider distribution, but may have now created their own independent companies in-house to create films that have that independent feel. Production houses such as Fox Searchlight, Screen Gems, or Paramount Vantage, and many more are branches under the umbrella of major studios such as 20th Century Fox, now owned by Disney, Sony Pictures, and many more. Despite studios creating their own indie companies to create independent films, there are many other independent production companies that create as well, and these are legit. The budget can be considered a factor in determining what's an independent film and what's more studio-driven, but the core difference between the two is the story and how things are portrayed on the screen. Independent films focus on telling a smaller story through its characters and their development rather than the pure action. Because studios have a higher budget, they have the luxury to tell a story more through action, special effects, and star power because they can afford it. However, independent films usually go for a character-driven approach where the characters are at the core of the action and we understand them on a personal level. We find out where they are in life and the personal journey we'll experience with them from start to finish of the film, what they are at the pinnacle of their life, then experience loss or vice versa. Now let me give you an example. Say here's the war film. A studio version would be about soldiers trekking miles on end to find one soldier and bringing them home. An indie film would focus on the just one soldier or the unit itself in one moment of the journey. Indie films are character-driven stories made with less money, small cast and crew, and with very little to work with and to compensate the characters are put in realistic situations and fight through relatable drama and comedy to win over audience appeal. With that said, Ryan Coogler managed to place character-driven stories like Fruitvale into a blockbuster like Black Panther. That's his style. Coogler's style is integrating deep themes such as masculinity, paternity, and family, which is seen in all three of his films so far. Fruitvale Station's Oscar is a father struggling and working hard to make ends meet for his girlfriend and daughter, and despite the 2-hour film taking place over 24 hours, we know Oscar's situation and feel for him within the first several minutes. Creed is Adonis facing the legacy of a father he's never met or really knew besides what was left behind. Black Panther, similar, is an action-driven superhero film, but Coogler manages to squeeze family legacies and culture into the heart of the story.
Yeah, it's about a politician, you know? So it was no way for it to not be.
Yeah, interesting.
You know how we always saw it, like it's a character who's the political leader of a fictional country, and it's fictional, you know. But we put it on a real continent. We wanted to set it in the real world.
Coogler, even though he's going from an indie endeavor with a very small budget and crew to a huge studio-level project, the director still keeps a style of telling real deep scenarios and themes, no matter how outlandish the plot may be.
Bitch, motherfucker! Slow down! What's up, bro? What's up, bro? It's all right, bro. It's all right. It's all right, bro. It's all right, bro. You with me, bro? Come on, bro. Come on. Somebody help!
We usually assume many directors now tend to stick with independent filmmaking compared to studios due to being able to create a film that they envision and want. That can be a situation, but also not. There have been many film directors who have went from indie films to create studio style, sometimes considered blockbusters, but still retain creative control over their project. It's all the matter of who you're working with and whether they trust your vision or not. Ryan Coogler has a vision and a passion that those he chooses to work with tend to allow him to have autonomy over his creativity. There are many directors similar, such as Jordan Peele, who was also a famous black director, or even Jon Favreau, who ended up directing Iron Man and many more studio films than after.
When you're dealing with a big studio on what's clearly designed to be a franchise, how different is it? What kind of restrictions do they put on you?
The biggest difference actually wasn't in the restrictions. It was actually in the lack of restrictions. You know, that's actually the bigger difference. You know, like I was making my first film, you know, and I think we all, like with the exception of Bradley, who spent a lot of time on a lot of different types of sets as an actor, I think we all started relatively small. You know, I feel like I seen all of y'all first movies. They was pretty small, and you know, when you're dealing with not a lot of money, you got a lot of limitations, and it helps you actually move faster because you know you can't do just anything. You know what I mean? It's only maybe sometimes one place you can put the camera. You know, you can only be in this location for 2 hours, and then you gotta go. So it makes it you know a little simpler, which in effect makes it easier. Like when you can do anything, you know what I mean? And that's kind of what happens with a film like this. That's when I found made it a lot harder. And you're just dealing with like so many more people. You know, you got to get comfortable directing, you know, in a room full of, you know, 75, 100 people sometimes. And you know, a lot of times I find directing can make you feel like you're naked. You know what I mean? Like, so, like directing on a 10-person crew is like being naked in front of 10 people. But if you, with 200 people, you know what I mean? It's a different.
Do you all feel that
ballgame.
vulnerability?
That's all the way butt naked, right?
All the way but naked,
Yeah.